It's like my favourite kind of bigot is an obvious one. And the people that live there, so respect their decision of avoidance if you bring white guests. So you have to, if you rocked up with a white friend, you have to say, no, you can't come in because you're white. Hello, welcome back. I can't believe I'm still talking about this. I can't believe we are still doing this as a species in 2022. So, in UC Berkeley, there's a building held by a private landlord where no white people are allowed in. And to me, it sounds a bit like this. I could be wrong. You guys let me know in the comment section if you think this isn't this. If you think that it's different, it's a different thing and you're seeing it wrong. Because from where I'm seeing it across the pond in England, so like as an outside observer watching the Ents move, to you guys it's a forest, to me I'm seeing it differently. Do you know what I'm saying? So segregation is the official practice of keeping people apart, usually people of different sexes, races or religions. And there is a purpose for segregation. For example, there should not be a little girl exposed to a naked man. That's just something that's like most people understand that's a common thing. So we segregate like changing rooms or bathrooms, stuff like that. We segregate them so that a little girl doesn't walk into a bathroom and see a man's dick swinging in front of a urinal, or a urinal, as you guys would say it. Like, she doesn't have to see that. And conversely, a little boy doesn't have to go into a woman's room and see loads of women in there. We segregate them for the sake of the children. We segregate. And the adults sort of agree with that. We know it makes sense, right? Well, the little girl should be in the woman's changing room. So if women are getting naked in there, she's going to see like an old naked woman, a young naked woman, and maybe a girl her age naked. That makes sense because then that's her. She associates with that. That's what she is. So she'll feel comfortable in that group. Same with little boys. Little boys are going to see old men's nuts and young men's nuts, and they're going to think, all right, that's what I'll be when I grow up. And it's like a natural thing for them. But a little boy should not be in a room with loads of naked women. Like old ladies and young, like a girl his age. You should not see a girl his age nude. Do you know what I mean? So we have to segregate them in order to do it. So there are benefits to it. But the moment you do it based on race lines, we've got some problems. Okay? So I've brought the definitions up for both of them. So social means relating to society or the way it's organised. So social segregation is to organise society in a certain manner based on a result we want to achieve. So like I previously mentioned in that example, we segregate the men and the women, the girls and the boys, and the goal that we are attempting to achieve is to stop those children encountering things that might warp or distort them. So like sexual things of the opposite sex isn't good for a child to see. They shouldn't really be encountering that. So that's why that definition's up. But then I just want to quickly go on to this. It's not just white people that have done this, because a lot of people now think that all racist things that have ever happened is the white man's fault and the white devil and these Mayo monkeys and all these racist slurs that they've got for white people. But it's not actually true. Like 1 in 200 men have got Genghis Khan's DNA. The Great Khan, the one who conquered Asia, the Mongol horde that Europe was petrified of, led by Genghis and his son Kublai. Yeah? 1 in 200 men alive today have got Genghis Khan's DNA, because that man did nothing but rape and pillage and cross the country, and he had slaves, and there was a caste system where like Mongols were the supreme and then everybody was beneath, a bit like Hitler tried to do. Do you know what I mean? And it's a very similar thing. So if we just quickly just look through this first paragraph from Britannica, it just gives you a brief overview of how broad racial segregation actually is. So racial segregation, the practice of restricting people to a certain circumscribed area of residence or to separate institutions. So in English, that means keeping people in their own schools, their own churches, their own parks, so on. And on the base of race or alleged race. Now, alleged race means if you had a granddad that was black, a great-great-granddad that was black, and you are now effectively white, you look Irish, you're ginger, you're pale, and you burn in the sun. If you've got an African grandfather, you've got 1 drop of African blood, so you're black. So you would be allegedly inferior in that sense, which is, looking back at it, it's completely illogical and irrational, but that's how it was back then. Racial segregation provides a means of maintaining the economic advantages and superior social status of the politically dominant group. White people aren't the politically dominant group in the West anymore. We're not. So we can't even be accused of doing it as a race, if you want to even use that language, because I don't like saying we and as a race, because I'm just a human being that happens to be white, and anybody who puts too much credit into the colour of someone's skin, in my mind, is just a bigot. They're a bigot, or they've got a low IQ. My IQ's around 140, and I don't have time for that shit. So, and in recent times, it has been employed primarily by white populations to maintain their ascendancy over the other groups by means of legal and social bars. That's the segregation that we are commonly thinking of. So we're thinking about different doors for black people. So like blacks entering the rear, whites entering the front, separate water fountains, black people not being able to receive service in certain like cafes and restaurants and hotels, and having to have their own separate little sections of town. And there's even a fucking horror story of a black town. I can't remember where it was. I'm going to have to look it up. I'll try and drop it in the comment, or I'll try and edit it in. But there was effectively like, it was, I think people call it the Black Wall Street. That's what people call it. If you type in the Black Wall Street, you'll find the story of it. And it was basically a town full of black people because they couldn't go anywhere. Like every time they went into a shop or every time they went into a restaurant, they'd get turned away, they'd get called all these horrible slurs, do you know what I mean? So they'd have to leave. So they went and set up their own town, and then loads of horrible racist bastards went and burnt the full place to the ground, pretty much levelled it, massacred people. Honestly, awful stuff. But that's the stuff that we think of because it's recent history. Everybody concentrates on the scab and forgets their scars, when the scars sometimes tell a deeper story. A scab is a recent wound that may heal, but a scar is something that you're permanently stuck with. Like in America, there's a division between your guys' states. I'm sure you guys will know it's called the slavery scar because it's part of your history, but not a lot of people in the world know that. So if you're not American, you're watching this is for the English people out there that watch it. There's a big line that divides America, and that's called the slavery scar because they just drew that line. Everything beneath that parallel, slavery was illegal, and everything above wasn't. And it scarred America because states had to give up a little bit. So the state that was cut through was like, oh, well, we want to keep slavery, so we're going to keep slavery here, and then we'll give that bit away. And then the states above were like, well, we want to get rid of slavery, so we'll give that bit away and they can keep slaves there. So it's like, we've got scars, geographical scars from slavery. This is no light subject. And we can't just ignore it. A lot of people like to say that racism is on life support by people that like to debate it. And that is true. But if we can't come to some common ground that the entire conversation is pointless, if we just need to get to the point where, do you know what, race doesn't matter, can we just move on? That's the point we need to get to. And we can't get there if people still believe race matters. So we need to try and convince people that it doesn't, because it really doesn't matter. It really does not matter. But anyway, historically, various conquerors, among them Asians, which is the Mongols, the Africans, which is the Bantus, and American Aztecs, practice discrimination involving segregation of subject races. Like everybody did it. In the peak of the transatlantic slave trade, before we had a cure for malaria, the average life expectancy of a white man on the African continent was around 8 to 12 months because you'd get malaria and die. But the natives were used to it. So if I now was alive in 1810 and I was a ship's captain and I got told that I had to go and pick some slaves up, I wouldn't have anything to do with picking the slaves up. I would take the boat there, and then a man would come from the shore, an African man would come from the shore, and he'd take my order, like a drive-through. An African man would come and he'd say, well, how many slaves do you want? Do you want men, women, boys, children? What do you want? We've got a good selection. Give me a list. He'll go over and he'll get them and he'll come back, because I wouldn't want to risk getting malaria, and I wouldn't send any of my native English crew or Spanish crew or Portuguese crew over there. So African people were selling African people, but the white men get the blame. All we did was deliver people. Like if you look at it, like we as a race, which I don't like doing, but all white people did was deliver them. The black people were selling them. The black people were capturing them, killing the women, killing the men, selling the women and children on as slaves. They were doing it. But it's happened throughout history. The Mongols did it to the Asians. The Africans did it to other Africans. The Aztecs and the Mayans did it to each other. We've been doing it as a species forever. So to now say that, oh, it's all the white man's fault, you're just being racist yourself. And I don't believe you can see the irony of it. But yeah, we'll keep going. And we'll actually look through this. So the Person of Colour Theme House is a private housing co-op off campus. So it's held by a private landlord. And it's meant for low-income first-generation immigrants and marginalised students of colour. But you cannot even bring white people into the common areas. You must alert the residents if you want to bring white people into the house. Many POCs moved to be able to avoid white violence and presence. So they're in a situation in their life now where they openly admit they don't want to be around white people because they're white, and that is racist. So The people that live here are my favourite kinds of racists, the obvious ones. Because if somebody's obviously racist, you know to avoid them. I don't like the racists that hide the racism and pretend, oh, I don't mind them, I haven't got a problem. They're the ones that annoy me because they're playing games. The ones that are just out, like, I don't mind the KKK members because I know to avoid them. But somebody who in the street who pretends to be a nice guy and who's really, really racist, he can, like, I'd rather somebody, if a KKK member and a member in the street held the same views, the KKK member is less dangerous because I know his views. Whereas that guy in the street who holds the same views, he's really dangerous. He's really dangerous. Imagine if there was a little kid in the street, a little black kid in the street, and he just decided to lynch them. At least if he was in a hood, the kid would know to avoid them. So, like, my favourite kind of bigot is an obvious one. And the people that live there, so respect their decision of avoidance if you bring white guests. So you have to, if you rocked up with a white friend, you have to say, no, you can't come in because you're white. That's what you have to do. So you can rock up to this building as someone who lives there, look in the room and see someone, and because there's somebody sat in that room, that white person's not allowed in. That's segregation. That's racism to me. So we'll keep going so I don't make a long video. I just want to show you the actual rules here. So this is where the entire thing blew up from. Guests in common spaces, this section here, it says guests are allowed in common spaces, but please be mindful if there are house members in the room beforehand. White guests are not allowed in common spaces, right? See intro. And then the intro says, house members and rules should always be respected by all guests. Make sure your guests understand our house values and uphold the themes of the house, as you are responsible for their behaviour. Many POC members moved here to be able to avoid white violence and presence, so respect their decision of avoidance if you bring white guests. So they've effectively set up a little place there that's a throwback to the 1940s, but they've switched the races. So now, no white people allowed in there. So it's just segregation again, isn't it? Welcome to 2020, where racism is alive and well in America. Peace.